And welcome. It is time for Constitution Radio. It's bringing me up on the screen there. There we go. Good to see you. If you're watching on Rumble or you're watching on YouTube, be sure to participate. And it's live. You're watching live between 1 and 3 Pacific time on a Saturday. You can chat in the chat room. I would love to see what you have to say. It's good for the algorithm. Also, if you want to have a permanent something you said, unless I delete it, put some in the comment section also. If you watch later, glad you're watching later. Most of our listens are later. We have, a handful of people that watch this live. We get most of our viewers when it's, week out or whatever. And welcome as well. Don't forget to comment. Visit me at douglasvgibbs.com. And if you want to ask me something personally, well, I shouldn't say personally, but individually, and my wife's over here, personally, no personal questions. But if you want to, individually communicate with me at douglasvgibbs.com, in the chat bar there at the top, there's a link that says Ask Doug. Hit that, fill out the form. I usually respond within a day or two, depending on the schedule and how quickly I can get to it. There's always a lot to talk about. All right, I have with me Dennis Jackson and Alan Myers. Dennis Jackson, who has been with me on this program since day one. Well, I shouldn't say since day one, but here since day one. But this used to be a radio program, KMET 1490 AM. Before that, when day one really existed, at KCAA AM 1050 for 15 years. This program was on AM FM radio. I decided to move to a different place. My sponsors and advertisers are retiring or moving along. My funding mechanisms have changed. So AM FM radio came to an end on July 4th, 2026. Now here we are. And let's start with the first thing to talk about. And so I'm watching television, and I'm shocked at what I'm seeing. In an office, probably the governor's office, that its version of an Oval Office, whatever, in Massachusetts, the governor of Massachusetts is signing a law surrounded by a bunch of women who are clapping and cheering over this new law. Was it more protections for feminists? No. Was it protecting women in sports? No. It was a law in Massachusetts allowing abortion up to the birth of a child. If you want to have an abortion in Massachusetts 5 minutes before that baby is supposed to be born, theoretically you can, because of this new law. Let me be blunt. What we witnessed in Massachusetts isn't just politics. We saw a celebration of death that can't be anything other than downright evil. Democratic Governor Maura Healey signed away Massachusetts gestational limits on abortion, making it the 10th state to permit the procedure up to birth. But it wasn't the signing that was chilling. Like I said, it was the reaction of those gathered to witness this historic moment. As Healey put pen to paper on what they deceptively call the Prioritizing Patient Access to Care Act, the room erupted in applause and smiles. Liberal women packed the room and gleefully cheered as she effectively legalized the termination of healthy, pain-capable unborn children right up until the moment of birth. These weren't solemn faces confronting a rare medical emergency. They were beaming, laughing, celebrating, as if they just won the lottery. This represents everything our founding fathers feared. The Constitution was established to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, those not yet born. When the Declaration of Independence proclaims that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, with life listed first among them. It wasn't suggesting these rights apply only after exiting, the birth canal. I have two quotes by James Wilson, member of the Constitutional Convention and fighter for the Constitution during the Ratification Convention. Governments in general have been the result of force, of fraud, and accident. After a period of 6,000 years has elapsed since the creation, the United States exhibit to the world the first instance, as far as we can learn, of a nation unattacked by external force, unconvulsed by domestic insurrections, assembling voluntarily, deliberating fully, and deciding calmly concerning that system of government under which they wish that they and their posterity should live. That was James Wilson, November 26, 1787, in remarks during the Pennsylvania Ratifying Convention. He also said this, listen carefully. With consistency, beautiful and undeviating, human life from its commencement to its close is protected by the common law. In the contemplation of law, life begins when the infant is first able to stir in the womb. By the law, life is protected not only from immediate destruction, but from every degree of actual violence, and in some cases from every degree of danger. That is James Wilson back in 1787. They knew what abortion was. Life, liberty, and property. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee. And I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Psalm 139:13 and 14. For you formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. And in the New Testament, John the Baptist, still in the womb, leapt in his mother's womb when Mary, carrying Jesus, walked nearby. This law in Massachusetts allows abortions at any point in pregnancy based solely on the professional judgment of the physician. A loophole so wide you could drive a hearse through it. The previous law already permitted abortions after 24 weeks to preserve the life or health of the mother, or in cases of severe fatal diagnosis. But that wasn't enough for the radical left. They demanded the right to terminate healthy babies of healthy mothers right until birth. And eventuality, those on the pro-life side have been telling everyone all along was someday coming if we didn't stop the barbaric practice of abortion. As believers, we cannot ignore the spiritual dimensions here. The Bible warns us in Isaiah 5:20, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Watching these women celebrate the legalized killing of unborn children brings this verse to life in horrifying clarity. This isn't health care, as they try to argue. It's child sacrifice dressed in medical scrubs. The ancient Canaanites threw their children into fires to appease false gods. Today, we dismember them in the womb to appease the god of convenience. The method may have changed, but the evil remains the same. Remember when pro-abortion advocates told us they just wanted abortion to be safe, legal, and rare? Those days are long gone. The Democratic Party has moved far beyond that reasonable sounding position. Now they hold signing ceremonies, pose for photographs, and applaud as abortion protections are expanded deeper into pregnancy. Massachusetts now joins Alaska, Colorado, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington, D.C. as jurisdictions with no statutory gestational limit. 10 states and the District of Columbia where a full-term baby can be terminated for any reason. 10 states where the most vulnerable among us have no legal protection whatsoever. What we're witnessing is the logical endpoint of a movement that treats abortion as both medical necessity and political sacrament. The cheers at the State House, the smiling faces, the applause, all point in the same direction. A culture that has decided some human lives are disposable right up to the moment of birth. Late-term abortions often involve a gruesome process where the baby is fatally poisoned in the womb and then delivered dead. They can also involve an abortionist crushing and dismembering a baby before its delivery, pulling the baby out piece by piece. This isn't a medical procedure. It's barbarism. And to celebrate it, to cheer it, to applaud it, that's something else entirely. As conservatives, as Christians, as constitutionalists, we cannot remain silent in the face of such evil. The rule of law is grounded in natural law and the laws of nature and of nature's God, not in the whims of politicians or the applause of crowds. When our government legalizes the killing of the most vulnerable, it has abandoned its most fundamental purpose, to preserve life. Governor Healy and those cheering her, one day they will stand before a holy God. And I don't think they will be cheering then. But until that day comes, it falls to us, those who still believe in the sanctity of life and defend the defenseless, those of us who are willing and able to call evil by its proper name. What happened in Massachusetts wasn't just a political victory for the pro-abortion movement. It was a spiritual battle lost, a line cross that should never have been approached. The demons were indeed clapping in the background. And America, if we don't turn back soon, will reap what we've sown. Dennis, this is a serious topic. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's kind of ironic in a way. You take laws that have to do with murder and killing, and you can go back centuries, you can go back millennia, and generally, if you're a murderer, you kill somebody, you forfeit your life. In the Wild West, you could forfeit your life for just being a cattle rustler. They'd hang you. But for this type of murder, this isn't a murder in anger. This isn't revenge. This isn't the lover that broke up your family. This isn't the guy who ran over your child in his car because he was drunk. This isn't, somebody who, flew off the handle and did something and, took somebody's life. This wasn't a gang member that just shot his gun in a neighborhood just to get a few rounds off and, killed a child or two unintentionally. But this is premeditated. This is in a hospital, a building that it was built primarily to build people, build their health back, fix their broken bones,
to save lives.
Yeah. And, then these abortionists, these baby murderers, if you bring up the fact that you want the death penalty for a gangbanger or for anybody, a guy who executes a cop in cold blood, whether it be, the Reiner child who killed both his parents, you still got those two brothers for the last 30 years, out in California, they killed their mom and dad with shotguns. Can't remember their name.
Melendez.
Yeah, they're still in court. They're still alive, But if you take the case to say the death penalty ought to be carried out and it ought to be carried out swiftly instead of the automatic California state appeals that make everything, and it takes 10 years to get the appeal done, and then another 10 years after that to where they appeal for 30, 40 years before they finally die of, old age. But to me, that's the irony. The people that do this ought to be convicted according to state laws that are there to protect life, and they ought to be executed. Now in this case, the doctor is, obeying law, but, so what are you going to do? You're going to take his license when he's doing something that's legal? Like you say, the legal system has changed. And, the United States of America that was founded on correct principles is now going to the dark side. I mean, it's doing stuff that they don't even do in Russia, So yeah, I fear our hallowed days are going to turn into hollowed days, and that the judgments of God are going to come upon this country. And I do think, not to overly try to shift gears, but regrettably, I think the United States will wind up successfully being turned into one of the most wicked nations on earth, as it's demonstrated by this thing here today. And we will have our comeuppance. So do we just surrender? Do we no longer have the good fight? If you try to put up the good fight, you get silenced. You're a monger, whatever monger it is. You're a homophobe. You're a transgender phobe. I guess I'm a baby phobe. I don't know. But they'll use that against you, and the media will continue to do what they can do to you to silence you. But yeah, this is horrendous. The founding fathers, they'd be, if they didn't hang him, they'd run him out of town on a royal or tar and feather him or something. But the slippery slope is no longer the slippery slope. It is now just a cliff that people are jumping off of, and I don't know if we'll ever get it back. I think it might take, the second coming for this to be fully addressed. I don't know. You can campaign against it. You've got other states that are going the other way, that are getting rid of abortion. But, this is pure evil. You were talking about El Sayed and the Sharia law and all that crap. There's no place for any of these roots to grow in American soil. And infanticide is just one of several, but it's among the worst.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir. You know, and based on what you said, a quote by Thomas Jefferson came to mind. Thomas Jefferson made a famous statement on God's justice. Quote, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. Now, he wrote this in his 1782 book, Notes on the State of Virginia, while condemning the evils of American slavery. But you could see that quote so applied here easily. Mr. Allen.
Yeah.
So this is a serious topic. We touch on it every once in a while, but we haven't seen this. It struck me. I'm watching this. I'm watching this video of this governor signing this document, and it's like, it was almost like, you know, when Trump signed something for, you know, children, you know, and surrounded by kids, you know, what was it? The Trump accounts, you know, where, you know, the money can be, you know, saved for children. So when they're older, they have more money and stuff. And, you know, and he's surrounded by children and everyone's smiling and it's an exciting day. That was the image, almost something like that they tried to portray at this signing, except for this governor was surrounded by women clapping and cheering, excited that they were writing into law the opportunity to abort, to end the pregnancy, to slaughter the baby in the womb up to the moment that child is supposed to be born. It was, and that, it is, I'm already pro-life. I already believe that abortion is murder. But when you've got women cheering, see, because a woman, her body, this is the place supposed to be safe for a child. A mother's womb is safety. A mother's love is safety. And these same women are cheering a law that is essentially child sacrifice, even when that child can easily exist outside the womb. It floored me, sir. What's your thoughts?
I'm going to approach this a little bit differently. The topic that you've brought it's incredibly heavy, very disgusting, what is being advocated. You know the name Frederick Bastiat?
Yes, the law.
Frederick Bastiat believed in classical liberalism, absolute free trade, limited government. He argued that individuals possess natural rights to life, liberty, and property, and the sole purpose of the law is to protect these rights rather than plunder citizens through taxation, tariffs, and socialist redistributions. Very much a patriot. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a quote from him. It's not directly applicable, but you'll get an idea at the end. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men living together in society, they create for themselves in the course of time a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it. That's kind of what you're talking about.
Absolutely. That's chilling. That is chilling.
And my thought is, I got questions for you. How is this new law constitutional? Is it?
Well, the federal government can't make any law regarding that anyway, because there's no authority.
No.
But this is a state,
right?
And so you got to look at the state constitution first of all. Second of all, even if I don't care what the state constitution says, the murder of a human being, there's nothing legal about it. There's nothing that gives, you know, I mean, every single state constitution, our United States Constitution, they all, and the Declaration of Independence indicate that life is the first right. This is the first right thing. Without life, there is nothing else.
All right.
Well, Doug,
Preservation of life. That's the first natural right you hear in every writing. John Locke, whoever you want to go with. All right, go ahead, Dennis, sir.
well, there's a problem, though, and it's a commonsensical problem. They don't define, and Congress has had this thrown out for decades. They don't define when life begins, just like they didn't define natural born citizen. So you can use the word, you can praise life, but if you don't say life begins until the baby takes its first breath, then they use that for an excuse to say that's not live. It's just tissue. It's just matter. I mean, yeah, it's growing on its own. It's got its own circulatory system, its own breathing apparatus. It's not getting air from the mother's lungs, the umbilical. I mean, it's an independent life within the womb. But yeah, you kill the mother, you kill the baby, obviously, so there is a dependency there. But, they don't define it. Congress has had the opportunity many times, conservative, liberal, whatever, to say life begins at conception, but they don't do it. They won't draw the line, because if they do, it's a line that politically could get them in trouble. So they don't draw it. Willfully, they don't draw it.
But this is the game they play across the board.
I know.
We know life begins at conception, just like we know what a woman is and a man is. They say, well, I don't know. We really don't know the definition. That's the game they play across the board. We don't know the definition. James Wilson in 1787 said life is protected not only from immediate destruction, but from every degree of actual violence, and that it is protected by the common law and begins when the infant is first able to stir in the womb. They knew, and they're not even have all of this modern technology, but yet we can't even define a woman, much less when life begins.
Well, and we allow them to get away with it still. The people, I don't care. You can talk about, making phone calls and writing emails and getting involved in campaigns and, letter writing and all of that. But, they're still doing that. I mean, look at the Ketanji Brown confirmation hearing.
But hang on a second now. And so we're sitting here all about, well, they can't define, but yet you will be fined if you mess with a tortoise egg or an eagle egg. They know when life begins there. So we've got animal worship and child sacrifice.
What could go wrong? All right, I'm going to continue. Something to think about. Somehow, some way, for some people, I don't agree with this, but what this provides the opportunity to do is now become culturally acceptable.
It normalizes it.
But here's
that's what they do. They give you the worst extreme.
Yeah.
Make it as horrific as possible so that anything less is normalized.
Right. And this is all a theoretical. It's not something I hope for. But let's say, for example, a very pregnant woman is attacked. She lives, but the baby in the womb dies. Is that a murder charge?
In California, they will charge you.
Okay.
Even though
then if you
they play it both ways, Alan.
In New York, until a few years ago, if the mother and the child dies, as a double homicide.
Okay. So,
but then when they got accused of what we're saying, they changed the law.
Okay. When you're not playing to a crowd and you're playing to decency, common sense, caring, you know where this goes.
Mm-hmm.
Which means if you, and let's say this woman is 8 months pregnant, okay, that's a murder charge. But somehow, if some physician decides, even let's say after the water breaks, that it's okay to do this, this is not medicine. This is not care.
That's like saying during a crime of passion, it's really the decision of the murderer and the spouse who hired him. I mean, well, but I'm being killed. Yeah, but you don't matter. This is a decision between the spouse and the murderer she hired or he hired.
Right. So ultimately, this speaks absolutely loudly to the mindset of these people.
Mm-hmm.
And it really speaks to, for those who object, we need to get active. We need to speak out. We need to do something. And create options, because there are options. And what gets me about this is that you are pregnant, you are going to have a child, but you don't want it. Do you think there's a line out the door of people who will adopt? Yes, absolutely. And if you don't want to get into that condition, there's at least 6 different ways to prevent that condition from happening. Stop being lazy.
Stop being promiscuous.
Well, just don't be lazy about it, okay? And it just shows such a lack of caring for convenience.
Like a responsibility, same thing.
Yeah, it's a horrendous story, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you for sharing, Doug.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, sir. All right, so the next article, story, discussion is regarding something that's kind of come up quite a bit lately, and the Islamic and progressive push is reaching critical stages on a number of things, be it socialism. But the thing I am in particular, I want to address in particular, is Israel. And I've even had to end a particular relationship recently online, show I used to do, because of it. And I don't want to do that because I want other people to be able to say their opinion. I am willing to debate, be tolerant of certain people, even though they have opinions I might not agree with. And I'm not being, I hope I'm not being like the, anti-Trump people in your family who just won't have a relationship with you anymore because you vote for Trump. And I don't want to be like that. But it has been so crammed down our noggins lately. And it's coming from allies. It's coming from people who I thought were also those who agree with, politically or whatever, people who claim to be Christians. And I even got a link the other day from someone who I thought, and maybe they are, an ally on this issue. But it was this misrepresentation of biblical text to prove that Israel is either no longer God's people or whatever. I'm being bombarded. And I'm not exaggerating. I'm being bombarded from all directions. For some reason, my support for Israel has opened up a floodgate. And there's even a website I go to regularly for conservative stories who started now posting anti-Israel stuff. That's the Liberty Daily. All the rest of the stuff's good, but they keep throwing this anti-Israel stuff out there. Now I'm mostly going to a website called Pro-Trump News. Those of you who are wondering, that's protrumpnews.com. No spaces, no dots, no hyphens. Because it's gotten to the point where the Liberty Daily even. And then I had this friend of mine on a Tuesday show starts pushing this well, you know, the Jews, because of the Jew and this and the Jew that. And like, dude, I don't want to talk about it. This is not the right venue, I told him. And he continued and pushed and pushed. And 4 times after I said, this is not the right place, I don't want to talk about this, you're angering me, I will hang up on this show if you keep it up. And he kept it up. He even said something that I found very, very disgusting. So I hung up from the show and I haven't been back.
Well,
I'm being,
there's.
Go ahead.
There's the chosen people. We can use that phrase. You can call it the ancient covenant people.
I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into that.
But my point is, their covenant was with God. All right. And the Jews, house of Israel, depending upon how you want to define it, because the house of Israel is different from the Jews. The Jews are just the tribe of Judah. That's 1 out of 12 tribes.
This is true.
Okay, so you got the north 10 tribes that were taken captive 700 BC, carried northward, and now they're lost. And they're called the lost 10 tribes. People don't know where they are. They just got absorbed someplace. Who knows? Okay, but God punishes those that he holds accountable if they've made covenants with him and they break them. And so God has been pro-Israel. He has been pro-Judah. He has been, in a way, anti-Israel, because he's told the Jews, they've been told that you're the covenant people, but if the Gentiles live the gospel and you don't, they're going to heaven and you aren't.
Well, it goes way beyond that, and I appreciate that. And let me get into what I'm going to say, and then I'll bring it back to you. It goes way deeper than that, be honest with you.
Well, I'm just simply saying that when Israel or in any group, they violate God's law, they lose the promise. And when they repent,
but it's like a parent, because God is the parent here, right? And if you've got a wayward son and you don't have a relationship with him anymore, and there's no communication, and they refuse to come back to you as a parent, you don't stop loving them. You don't stop caring about them. You don't stop wanting the best for them and look out for them, because they're your child. And in a sense, that's how I look at Israel when it comes to God. But it goes even deeper than that. And, and understand, I'm getting, and hello, omnidirectional, good to see you in the chat room. But I'm getting bombarded with this. It doesn't mean that I think Israel does no wrong by supporting Israel, or that I don't recognize that, like all of humanity, they are fallen and disobedient to God. I don't always agree with all of their political decisions today as the nation of Israel. And like America, the country is plagued with leftism and a deep state. So let's first of all understand all of that. But setting all of that aside, we have to understand there's a lot more going on here. And the challengers to my support for Israel, the people who are attacking me because of my support for Israel, are going beyond the pale. They have adopted the language that's being put out there by the hard left and Islam. They're adopting the exact same language. The influence of these negative indoctrinational ideas is definitely making its impact on certain people. And I'm here to say that I think, from my perspective, my studies, like right now, my wife and I we're studying the book of Ruth. We're going through the whole Bible right now. And I've studied the Bible so many times. One of the things I can say about the Bible is I know it quite well. I can't always remember chapter and verse, but I know what's in there. And it's important for us to realize that these people are, for the most part, fundamentally misunderstanding God's covenants, his nature as a covenant-keeping God, which ties a little bit into what you were saying. The arguments are not based on these ideas. They're based on classic replacement theology errors by spiritualizing promises that God made in very specific physical terms to a specific people. The Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 12, 15, and 17. And, the link that was sent to me was, well, Israel's not mentioned. Israel didn't exist yet. That's not, that covenant wasn't to Israel, to Abraham. Absolutely it was. And it was an unconditional covenant. God didn't ask Abraham to do anything to earn it. It was based on God's own character and promises. Genesis 12, 2 and 3 states, I will make you into a great nation. What nation is he talking about? Israel. And I will bless you. I will make your name great. And you will be a blessing. I will bless you who bless you. I will bless those who bless you. And whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. And this is, in my studies, what I believe is that all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That is a call to Christ. Christ came through Israel. Christ came through David's line. There's a lot of things that had to go right throughout history for it to occur. God had his hand on it. And God made a distinction between I will bless you, referring to Abraham personally, and I will bless those who bless you, referring to the nation that would come from him. And ultimately, Christ through Israel. Without Israel, there is no Christ. The you in whoever curses you refers to the descendants of Abraham, the nation of Israel. This isn't just about spiritual blessings, but about a tangible, physical people and nation that God made a covenant with through Abraham. God's promise of the land to Israel is specific and irrevocable. Genesis 15, 18 through 21 describes the exact boundaries of the land promised to Abraham's descendants. Israel has never achieved all of those lands. Even at the height of Israel, during Solomon and David, they were not able to fulfill the entire land that God said is yours. And it won't be fulfilled until after the second coming. But understand that this wasn't just some spiritual metaphor. It was a real estate transaction with God himself. The fact that Israel was temporarily displaced from their land doesn't nullify the promise. God's promises are not dependent on Israel's performance, just like salvation, I believe, is not dependent on our performance. It is grace. It is a gift from God. You don't have to earn it, but when you get it, I expect you to act like you're a part of it. But that performance doesn't have to happen in order to get it, but it will happen because you got it, if that makes sense. The fact that Israel was temporarily displaced from their land and spread out through all nations didn't make them also cease to be a nation. They continued to be the people of Israel. God's promises were to that nation, whether they had their land or not. The argument that Jesus, and then there's an argument out there, well, Jesus redefined who the children of Abraham are. And that's a misuse of scripture. And this is where the replacement theology garbage comes from. Jesus said in John 8:39, if you were Abraham's children, he was addressing specific individuals who were claiming physical descent, but rejecting the faith that characterized Abraham. It wasn't nullifying the covenant promises to the nation of Israel. Romans 11 makes this abundantly clear. Paul writes, did God reject his people? By no means. Romans 11:1. He uses the olive tree analogy to show that God has not permanently rejected Israel. Some branches were broken off because of unbelief, and they can be grafted in again. According to Paul, the church has been grafted into the root of God's covenant promises. But that doesn't mean that the natural branches, Israel, are permanently cast aside. The argument that there was no Israel before 1948, like I said earlier, is historically and biblically inaccurate. The nation they were exiled from their land. The Jewish people, they maintained their identity as a distinct nation. Sure, there was some intermixing. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on. It's human nature. Prophets like Jeremiah and Ezekiel spoke of Israel's future restoration while they were in Babylonian captivity. God told them they would return to their land, and he kept that promise, and it happened in 1948. And then, so yeah, but Doug, that was something that actually happened politically. No, that was God's doing. While the church and while the church has been grafted into God's covenant blessings, this doesn't mean that God has abandoned his promises to Israel. The church hasn't replaced God's covenant with Abraham. Romans 11 teaches that all Israel will be saved, indicating a future national restoration and spiritual revival for the Jewish people, which I believe happens after the end times. That's what I believe. Regarding the blessed, those who bless you principle, history serves as evidence. Nations that have blessed and protected the Jewish people have generally prospered, while those that have persecuted them, like Nazi Germany, have faced judgment. This principle applies not just to ancient Israel, but to the modern state of Israel, to the Jewish people as a whole, not just even the state of Israel. The entire Jewish people are Israel, because they are the same people in the same land God promised them, and the same people if they're not in the land. And yes, I understand there's this genetic difference and that and this group, and you could go crazy with it because people then start to take it apart with all their little details. In the end, God made a covenant with Israel, and I will support Israel as a Christian. Israel's greatest friend is the American Christian. Dude, does that mean I think that Israel does no wrong? No. Does that mean I agree with every single political thing Israel does? No. Does that mean that I think that Israel is obedient to God? No. But I still support them, just like as a father of a wayward child, I would still support my child. Doesn't mean I'm approving of the bad activities. It means as a family member, I love that child. God loves that child, his chosen people. Chosen. He chose them. And I appreciate the fact that folks out there think they are trying to educate me on this. They are afraid that I might think something that's not right. And hey, I would do the same for them if I think something's right and they think. That's what I do with Constitution and my faith. I am not shy about it. So I appreciate the fact that people are trying to educate me on this important topic. But I believe we need to distinguish between God's unconditional covenant promises to Israel and conditional blessings individuals receive through faith. The Abrahamic covenant wasn't nullified by Jesus' coming. Jesus' death and resurrection opened the way for both Jews and Gentiles to have a relationship with God. When Jesus spoke about true children of Abraham, he was addressing individuals who had the physical lineage but lacked the faith. He wasn't nullifying God's promises to the nation of Israel as a whole. Romans 11 makes that clear that God hasn't rejected his people. Israel existed as a people even without their land. God's promise to restore them to that land was fulfilled in 1948. Prophecy is still happening. So for you preterists out there who say, well, prophecy has already happened, it's a bunch of bull. Don't fall for it. You've fallen for lies. This wasn't merely a political act in 1948. Well, the British did this, and I've heard the story. It was a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. It was prophesied. How the pieces fell into place wasn't prophesied, but the fact that it would happen was. Supporting Israel doesn't mean ignoring the importance of the gospel or the church. Rather, it's acknowledging that God keeps his promises to all peoples, and he's keeping his promise to Israel. And it is incumbent upon me as a Christian to support Israel. As a result, if I'm a part of the family, if I've been grafted onto the tree through the blood of Christ, I need to be supporting my siblings, my spiritual siblings, God's chosen people. Alan, what's your thoughts, sir? Alan?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. I just was on mute. Another light topic this afternoon. Thank you.
I'm just full of fun today, aren't I?
Joy, exuberation, everything. If you're going to do it right, this is my big overall view. If you're going to do it right and you're going to keep in line with the Creator, however you do it, you're not hoping to kill people. You're not hoping to take things from them. You're going to leave them alone. Excuse me. Being a Jew in this world is not an easy thing. Being a Jew in the Mideast is really not easy. You mentioned 1948. Well, 1948, Israel was able, with UN approval, after the Holocaust of World War II, was able to declare statehood. And what was its welcome to the neighborhood? The next day, 5 countries attacked. If you want to really read about this, there's a book out there called I Am My Brother's Keeper.
Yeah, you've mentioned this before, and I have the book. I haven't read it yet, but I have the book.
5 nations attacked. Now, Britain allowed all the Arab countries to arm. Britain did everything it could to prevent Israel from arming. A lot of people from World War II, pilots, they all kind of knew what was coming.
I want to stop you just for a second. What'd you say about Britain? Say that about Britain again. And I want you to repeat it for a reason. What did Britain do?
Britain allowed the Arab countries to arm, and Britain did what it could to prevent Israel from arming.
And you know what was going on at the same time?
You're going to
the British Empire fell apart, and they stopped being the great empire, and they stopped being the world reserve currency. They, like Nazi Germany, they lost their blessing because they went against Israel.
Thank you. Anyway, there was a lot of preparation involved. You had a lot of pilots from World War II coming to Israel's aid.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting planes from Czechoslovakia. But we know what happened. Israel survived the welcome to the neighborhood party. And it hasn't been that easy ever since. I don't agree with everything Israel does. But maybe things would be differently if you just stop picking on it and letting it be the way it's going to be.
The safest place for a Muslim in the Middle East, by the way, is Israel. That's what's hilarious about it.
Yeah. Okay. Can you become a citizen of Israel if you're not Jewish? Yes. They have a large community of, I'll call them Arabs, in Israel. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Are they attacked on a daily basis? No.
There are mosques in Israel.
Yeah.
Open up a synagogue in a Muslim country, see what happens, or a church for that matter.
Let's not do that.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like with America. I think you know where I stand on the country,
mm-hmm.
where I stand with the Constitution, liberty, freedom, rights. Does that mean I agree with everything the federal government does? No. Do I think the federal government is to a great extent our federal government. Note, I do not say national, it's federal. It was never intended to control the country. Do I think it is always constitutional? Absolutely not. There's a difference between believing in the country and the people that support it.
Right.
And the
like
government.
I was going to say, do you not, because of the problems with the federal government and their history, do you hate America? No.
No. I
love my country. I'm not real happy with the government sometimes, but I love my country.
But the other thing I have gotten out of all our discussions and time together with you and Dennis is that, and if, as you know, I don't read the Second Amendment the way I used to.
Yeah.
And I don't read the opening of the Constitution the way I used to. And as you know very well, the opening is "We the people." This is a very simple 3-word statement, but it is absolutely now to me massive. We is being defined, the people. And we have a duty and an obligation to do something that is seldom talked about, if not talked about at all. And that is, for me, tell me if you disagree or not, the Constitution wasn't written to take care of us, we the people. The Constitution was written so we the people take care of it and make sure it's followed. This is on us, we the people. Let people be, and if you have a problem with their government, make it a problem with the government, but not the people. And then think about what it would be like to grow up in an environment where you are surrounded by potential armed combatants 24/7. It's going to be a little scary. But if you're a good person, then you don't care what someone's religious belief is. What you care is how they behave. And do they help? Do they give back? Or do they just take? Thanks for the happy chat again.
You're welcome. All right, Dennis, let's complete our discussion from earlier. Now that you've heard my entire spiel, what's your response, sir? Go ahead, Dennis. You're on mute.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have myself on mute.
Okay. That's okay. Go ahead, sir.
God holds us all accountable, and if the chosen people choose idolatry, then, they're going to have some famine, some pestilence, and some wars, and they're going to have some problems. And then when they repent, then they'll get back their blessings, kind of like you're talking about the father trying to reach out to his wayward son.
Right.
So, I mean, that's true. And so it's not written in stone. What's written in stone is the relationship of law and justice and mercy and the atonement. Those all come together come Judgment Day, and when you get people that want to, like you say, they're borrowing the war cry from someone else. If they use Israel as scapegoat for everything, then they aren't being honest. They're just trying to flush something. But us in our human condition, we don't see everything. We don't know everything that's going on behind the back wall. We don't know everything that's going on in their heart. We're told not to judge people, but we have to make judgments through life. And, the baby infanticide, I mean, that's to me pretty much black and white, but are there promises that are held out for Israel or Judah? Yeah, but there's also promises held out for anybody, if they will, repent and come unto Christ. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be a Jew. You can be anybody. You're a child of God. You're a son and daughter of God. You have the opportunities to receive all the blessings from God. But, again, that gets back into how you view things and do things, because true, we are saved by grace after all that we can do. I mean, if it weren't for the atonement, we're all gone. There is no way you can earn your way back. So I mean, I'm kind of being a generalist here, but I find it interesting that there is so much variety, not just in normal humanity, but I mean, there's a lot of variety right there, like you say in Israel. You've got socialists, you got Marxists, you've got atheistic Jews. You have the very strong, I don't even know what to call them, worshiping Jews, but that's the same with Christians. It's the same to some degree with, Catholics and Muslims and Protestants. Everybody, has their flavor as to how they think, God is involved in their life, So that's why to me, the Constitution is such a great document. It lays down, what the principles are, it divides up the power, but then you have people attacking it before the ink is dry, whether it be through the courts or whether it be through, like now, playing all these word games, So I think of Rudyard Kipling, and the poem If, if you can keep your head while all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can keep your faith while men doubt you and make allowance for their doubting too, the 60-minute mile, full seconds run, integrity. I mean, that's in play with all of humanity all the time. And when you get people that have their prejudices and they can't judge fairly, then they judge unfairly. And, that's a problem. So I don't know. It's a challenge. The Jews have been blessed. They've been cursed, like probably every other country. But there is a covenant and it's held out to them, the Abrahamic covenant, that through, his seed, all the world will be blessed. But there's a lot in that covenant that, it was the children of Abraham that were also in the Sanhedrin that were also, screaming for Barabbas instead of Christ. So, it's a total mixture.
All right, very good. Next topic. I remember when I was a young man, and
wait a minute, you can remember that far back?
Yeah, I'm younger than both of you guys. But I remember when I was a young man, back in the 70s, I was in elementary school. I know you were already, performing high-flying leaps in the circus by then.
Yes.
But he'd already been rejected by, numerous women. But I was in elementary school in the 70s, and my teachers were the hippies, and they were pushing a lot of Marxist ideas. I am left-handed. I was forced to write right-handed in my school, in my classes. Today I'm left-handed on most of my things. There's a handful of things I do still right-handed. I was trained that way. Some of the things I've learned how to do left-handed as well. And one of the other things that they did during my 4th, 5th, and 6th grade year, I've experienced all of it, man. I've been in where you had tracks where you didn't have a summer. It was track A, B, C, and D, and E. But this one, what it was is when we were in Long Beach, no grades. I mean, when I was in my earlier years in Bellflower, where I went to kindergarten, first, second, and then Cerritos, where I went to third grade, most of my third grade, I got my A or my B or my C or my D or my F, right? But in Long Beach, they decided they would go to the system where you had pass. No, let me rephrase that. It said satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or incomplete. That was your possibilities. You know, because when people get an F or a D or a C minus, you know, they feel bad about themselves. And then all these people get A's and they gloat about it, and it's not right. So we're going to get rid of the grades, you know, for everybody's, you know, for their self-esteem. That's the word. We only want to protect their self-esteem. So they did away with grades. And it was a catastrophe. It launched me into my worst years of my academic career. If I'm just going to get a satisfactory, why am I working so hard? Joe Schmo over there doesn't even turn in his homework, and he got a satisfactory. The University of Michigan has announced they're doing the same thing now because it's a great new idea. Thousands of freshmen will receive only pass or no credit grades rather than traditional letter grades. And they say they're doing this because, well, you know, it's their first year and they're not sure what they want, and they should be punished by a bad grade because they chose something that they decided they didn't want to do and they changed their mind. They have all these different reasons. And it's the latest manifestation of the very dangerous educational philosophy that was gaining traction when I was in school back in the 70s. And while administrators frame this grade covering pilot program as a mental health initiative, you know, because we want to help students, you know, acclimate to university life. We want to make it too hard on them with, you know, the threat of a bad grade. But it's nothing more than a foot in the door strategy to eventually eliminate grades altogether. This approach fundamentally misunderstands human nature and the competitive spirit that drives innovation and excellence. It completely disregards the whole system that we created in the United States under our Constitution. Free market, innovation. You get rewarded for doing well, be it a high grade or wealth or a successful company or whatever it might be. And it spits in the face of the founding fathers. It's Marxist. What we're witnessing at Michigan is a retread of failed educational experiments that go all the way back to Dewey with his progressive education ideas back in 1899 and the early 1900s. When Marxist influenced academics push for eliminating grades under the guise of promoting equality and reducing stress, what they're really doing is they're destroying the meritocracy. The underlying philosophy was the same then as it is now. If we remove measures of individual achievement, we can create a more equitable environment where no one feels bad about themselves. And the problem with this thinking is that it ignores a fundamental truth about human motivation. People strive for excellence when they can see and measure their success. That's why America is the greatest country on this planet, because of its free market, because of its liberty. When you eliminate the ability to distinguish oneself through superior performance, exceptionalism, you eliminate the incentive to perform at one's highest level. Michigan administrators claim this policy will benefit students' mental health, and it's a deeply flawed premise. True mental health comes from building resilience through overcoming challenges, not from being shielded from the reality that some performance is better than others. It's the old butterfly in the cocoon deal, right? The butterfly struggles to get out of the cocoon, and through that struggle becomes strong enough to fly. If you cut open that cocoon and let them out, it won't be able to fly. It needs the struggle. I can't count how many times I've read books and articles by successful people, and they're asked this question, what is the key to success? And their response is failure. When you fail, you learn your lessons. You don't want it to happen again. And some people, when they fail, they stop trying. My wife, she had a situation not too long ago. She started playing golf with me. And I think it was the second game that she played. And I'm trying to explain to her with her iron, she needs to kind of get up under the ball. She needs to scoop it out of the grass, give the grass a haircut. And she decided to try to scalp the grass. And when that club hit the dirt as hard as it did, it sprained her wrist. She finished playing the game, to her credit, or maybe not to her credit, depending on how you look at it. Still hasn't fully healed, but we're working on it. A month and a half later. And so she gets on the phone with her sister, and she says, I tried golfing. It was a lot of fun, but I strained my wrist. And her sister says, oh, you hurt yourself. So you're going to quit then. You're not going to play anymore. No, I'm going to play, but you hurt yourself. Why would you play? That's how you weed out the failures and you get those who will succeed. Failure, obstacles, difficulties. That is when the best shine through. Now, there's a professor at the University of Michigan, Derek Peterson. He says, well, you don't understand that students, they're in a particularly precarious situation here, a position. Well, and him explaining that, well, they're in this precarious situation. It's really tough. Well, that perfectly illustrates their misguided approach. Rather than helping students develop the tools to succeed in a competitive world, the policy coddles them at the moment they most need to develop grit and determination. If I know that my maximum reward for effort is simply a pass mark, the same as someone who does the bare minimum, why would I push myself to excel? This policy sends a clear message. Mediocrity is acceptable and striving for distinction is unnecessary. The competitive spirit that drives innovation, breakthroughs, excellence is being systematically dismantled. When students can't see the direct correlation between their effort and their academic standing, they naturally adjust their effort downward to match the reduced incentive structure. Human nature plummets operations to the lowest common denominator. Make no mistake, the freshman-only policy is just the beginning. Once established, the grade-covering approach will gradually expand to the upperclassmen, just like rare and safe abortions is now all the way up to the day of birth. The grade-covering approach will gradually expand to upperclassmen, then the other schools within the university system. The same arguments about mental health and acclimation will be repurposed to justify eliminating grades across the board. And the fact that other elite institutions like MIT or Caltech have implemented similar policies doesn't validate the approach. It simply shows how deeply this anti-meritocratic ideology has permeated higher education. What universities should be doing instead is helping students develop the resilience to compete and excel. Rather than eliminating grades, institutions should focus on teaching students how to handle both success and failure, both essential components of a well-rounded education. The competitive drive that motivates students to strive for A's isn't something to be suppressed. It's something that should be channeled productively. And this drive has fueled innovation and excellence throughout human history. And attempts to eliminate it in service of a misguided egalitarianism will ultimately harm both the students and society at large. The University of Michigan's gradeless experiment isn't progress. It's a regression to failed educational philosophies of the past, dressed up in modern mental health rhetoric. And unless we recognize it for what it is, a disincentive to excellence, this approach will continue to spread, further eroding the competitive spirit that has made American higher education at one time the envy of the world. All right, I think it's your turn now. Oh, he's gone. Where is Mr. Dennis? He's not there. So I guess, Alan, it's on you.
Oh, how sad. Well, it's nice to know that Long Beach taught you so much. When you started going into this topic, another cheery one for today, the first thought...
Yeah, I'm just full of joy on today's show.
Oh,
anyway, go ahead.
Bubbles and ribbons. Come on.
Bubbles, ribbons, and yellow balloons.
There you go. One of the first things that came to mind when you started talking about this topic is Jamestown.
Yeah.
Jamestown, when they first got there was a group that paid for this whole thing. And the idea that, tell me if I got this
Pilgrims
right.
also experienced, by the way, the exact same thing. But anyway, go ahead.
And the idea was that, okay, everybody works, everybody puts whatever they create in a barn, and it's going to be used to pay back the people that paid for their voyage, and everybody shares equally. Well, they almost didn't make it through the first year because it was, why should I work hard if I'm only going to get the same amount as everyone else? It didn't work in Jamestown. It's not going to work here. These professors have come up with excuses for excuses. Now, what I would like someone to imagine is that, how about you're growing up on a real ranch? Horses, cattle, chickens, hogs. Do you just get to do whatever you want, or do you have specific jobs that have to be done at specific times of the day? You got to do it. And if they're going to do this in the classroom, are they going to do the same thing on the sports field? Oh, well, you were there and you tried and you didn't do very well, but you get to be on the team. This is just more DEI stuff. And you're not preparing them to succeed. What they need to create is an equality of opportunity, not outcome. But imagine this is your educational experience. And somehow, some way you get hired by an employer for your new job. And this new employer is expected to accept bad work or no work because you were never driven and you've never driven yourself to perform at a high level? No. We learn to compete. We learn to excel. We learn to be tough. And this is not a mental health issue. This is just about becoming committed to succeeding and trying and learning from the process. And this is at an institution of higher learning. Pretty crazy. But on the same note, one last thing. I just saw this the other day, and I'm going to bring it up. And yeah, there's some back and forth about this. But the University of California, of all places, California, is reviewing whether to bring back standardized testing requirements. Over 1,400 faculty members have signed letters urging the system to reinstate SAT and ACT math, at least math requirements for STEM majors, because what they're noting is a sharp rise in students needing remedial math. They have until June 2027 to make a decision on this. So you want to go STEM, but you really are not, you didn't get the training you needed in high school to make you able to deal with the new standard in college. But you may see the SAT and the ACT come back. Now, did you take the SAT and ACT to go to college?
I took the PSAT, but I didn't get a chance to take the SAT because I had decided I was going to the military and didn't feel it was necessary.
Well, I wound up taking, I think I wound up taking both. I did not suffer nightmares afterwards. And though my grades were not excellent in high school, my SAT score was high enough, I got in. And, you know, some of the arguments against these is that, well, it's, you know, it's about equity, systemic inequality. Well, if you're not good enough to perform, especially in the STEM classes, do you really want them to graduate? Because, oh, well, they all got a passing grade. No, because they won't be ready to do what they have to do in the workplace. This isn't about feeling good going to school. This is about being able to perform well in the work world. Those are my thoughts. Thank you, Doug.
You know, and it brings to mind an article that I had mentioned a week or so ago about a high school English teacher who took to social media to share his concerns about the state of education in the U.S. because he was brought to tears as when he revealed that in his class he has seniors who cannot write a single sentence.
I saw that article.
Yeah,
high school teacher.
Right, and he gave them even the sentence. All they had to do is fill in 4 words on it.
Right, they couldn't do it. These are high school seniors.
Right, and they couldn't do it. He said, I have seniors who simply cannot read and seniors who cannot write. They cannot write. They could reason. They have the ability to defend their reasoning if it's talking to their homeboy, but applying that to a written text, 2 paragraphs, they couldn't do it.
That's an incredibly sad statement, and not about them, the students, but about the educational system they were given.
Right. All righty. So on this topic, we're talking about.
I saw Dennis briefly. Is he back?
Yeah, he is back.
Here.
Okay, good.
So we were talking about Michigan's gradeless Marxist retread that disincentivizes excellence. I trust that you heard most of it, probably read the article that I wrote about it. All right, Dennis. So now the floor is yours.
Well, you know, I agree with what you guys have said. My a gut feel, not 100% of my gut, but you know, there's a part of me that's saying, you know, that yeah, the system is failing. When it goes to pass fail, you know, you can't get A's, you can't get 4.0s or 4.5s or whatever you know, when you get your pluses and all that crap thrown into it. You know, now you're stuck with pass fail or incomplete. However, as a parent and as a child going to school, you know, you can still demand more of yourself and enough out of yourself to where you can learn how to write a paragraph. You know, that wasn't just the system failing those guys. It was themselves failing. They didn't care. They were more, I don't know, they're in the gangbang mentality. You know, their parents didn't care. I don't know. I don't want to get into, well, it's a welfare problem, because there's a lot of smart kids on welfare that do very well and they work their way out of welfare, you know. But the brain power, the professional people that are involved in education, when they come up with this malarkey, to me, it's kind of like the doctors and the governors that are signing, infanticide. I mean, they ought to be taken out and gotten rid of. They have no place.
Did we just lose
Getting
you?
their PhD,
Oh, there we go.
getting
There we
their
go.
job, they can't be fired, they have tenure, and then they just water it down and destroy it for everybody else. We've already gone back to SATs and ACTs on some colleges. You've got Yale and some of the law schools that no longer, law firms that would no longer hire from Yale and from Columbia, because they watered crap down to where they weren't getting what they used to pay for, and that's an economic blow. So then they had to repent, and they had to go back to, kind of like you're saying now, they're going back to standardized tests. There's nothing racist about a standardized test. The racists will say it's racist, but that's because they're trying to justify, the non-performance of, whatever group they're trying to make feel better, Oh, little Johnny, you're hurting his feelings. Well, too bad, Johnny. Somebody's going to hurt your feelings. It'd be better to the people that love you that hurt your feelings, that'll help you overcome it, than some stranger who's going to fire your butt once after they hire you because you can't turn on your computer and do a word program, word processing program.
Take responsibility for your actions, or as I like to say, man up.
Yeah,
do what you need to do.
When you water things down, that's what happens. And now, do you want your child going to that doctor that skipped his way through and wasn't being demanded to learn stuff in medical school? Do you want him performing the heart surgery, or whatever surgery they're doing?
Or flying the plane that you're on board.
Well, and look at that. I mean, we went through that a couple of years ago where, a white guy couldn't get hired. If you're a white guy and you were a fighter pilot and you had aircraft experience, they wouldn't hire you. You had to be, a minority. And they were holding out. And then they did the same thing to the air traffic controllers. You go to an air traffic controller school, you get a degree. They wouldn't use that degree anymore because that was white privilege. So they would just hire people and try and put them on the job, and they didn't have the innate skills, and they're up there guiding airplanes. You're playing with people's lives. Seriously, not just economically, their physical lives.
Right.
So now we've got the women going into the military, and to pass the physical test, the guys have got to do 10 pull-ups. The women have to do 3. They put it down to 1. I'm sorry. That doesn't cut it. You're not going to take a bunch of your women soldiers and put them up against a bunch of Russian soldiers that are men and expect them to win. And that's not a sexist statement. Look what's going on with the WNBA now. You got Enos Kanter Freedom and another guy that are declaring for the draft in 27 because they can't figure out what a woman is. I think Freedom is doing it for sarcasm. I'm glad he's doing it because it's pointing a bright light again on another totally
well, you expose
things.
You expose absurdity with absurdity.
Yeah, you do.
All right, very good.
It's kind of like if you leave your pants in your closet long enough, eventually they'll come back in style. Same thing with principles of leadership and success. Get away from them. Kind of like the, what's the name of it? The Tytler chart. You just work your way around. Yeah, you just work your way around and then you're back there again. But we all go through it.
All right, very good. In a case that has reached the United States Supreme Court, the growing tension between religious liberty and leftist anti-religious zealotry involves an Orthodox Jewish man in University Heights, Ohio, who has been forced to defend his fundamental right to pray in his own home. Daniel Grand's ordeal began when he simply wanted to host a small prayer gathering with approximately a dozen friends at his residence. Now, understand, I looked this up. It was because of it being the Sabbath, and they believe they shouldn't drive on the Sabbath. So it's not a parking issue. My first thought was, the neighbor's is complaining there's too many cars on the street. No, they're all walking there. Okay, so this is a guy who wants to have a prayer meeting in his house, and everybody attending walked there. The practice of holding a prayer meeting inside one's home is one that people of all kinds of faiths have engaged in for centuries. The First Amendment, and this is why we really need to talk about this First Amendment to the Constitution and religious freedom clauses of the state constitutions are clear that government has no authority to prohibit the free exercise of religion. Now, I can get into the First Amendment, but this is a local law. So what I did for the article is I pulled up the Constitution of the state of Ohio. Article 1, Section 7. All men have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own conscience. It shall be the duty of the General Assembly to pass suitable laws to protect every religious denomination in the peaceable enjoyment of its own mode of public worship. This even public. This is private worship, but it fits. Well, a neighbor learned of his plans. Now, again, not complaining about all the cars. There's not going to be any cars. They're walking there. So that means they're complaining about a prayer meeting. A neighbor learned of the plans and complained to city officials that someone was going to have a prayer meeting in their house. Now, think about that neighbor for a second. I had a guy playing drums at 9 o'clock at night, my neighbor. And I had grandkids that needed to sleep. And I told him, I don't care if you play drums, just don't do it at 9 o'clock while my grandkids are trying to sleep. You want to play drums? It's your house. Just don't do it in a manner that interferes with me. So unless these men in prayer also are playing loud music and dancing with clog shoes on their feet, more than likely the neighbor had no reason to complain. Wasn't a noise problem, more than likely. I don't know. Then again, I've not been in a Jewish prayer group. Maybe it gets loud. I don't know. But nonetheless, this neighbor learned about what was happening, complained to city officials, and the city officials agreed with the neighbor and told Daniel Grand, if you're going to have your prayer meeting at your house, you have to get a permit. Because what you're doing is for places of religious assembly. So you need to get a permit for it. And then the situation quickly escalated from bureaucratic red tape to something more sinister. The city officials, once they found out he wanted to have a prayer meeting, began to surveil Grand's home and allegedly encouraged neighbors to monitor his activities and report any suspected violations. Keep an eye on them. If they start praying, let us know. When Grand attempted to comply with the permitting, okay, fine, I'll get a permit. Jeez Louise, right? So he goes down there to get his permit, and he discovers it has an impossible catch. The permit requirements were designed for churches and synagogues, not private residences. So if he gets the permit, it now effectively turns his home into a meeting place for worship, and therefore it loses its standing as a residential home. So therefore, get the permit, but you can't live there anymore because now it's a house of worship. You get your permit, it effectively would force Grant and his family to stop living in their own home. The city presented Grant with an untenable choice: abandon his prayer meetings or surrender his family's residence. When he sought relief through the courts, the federal judges, and I understand the reason, but it's still BS. Well, you got to first complete the permitting process. Because see, the way the court system works is there has to be injury. If there is no injury, you have no case. No, you said you want to get a permit. You weren't injured. You didn't get it. They didn't stop you. They just said they would. Until it happens, you have no case. It was an administrative nightmare designed to be impossible to get through. This case represents a disturbing precedent. If opening one's home to friends for prayer now requires government permission and transforms a private residence into a regulated place of religious assembly, then we've got a real problem in America. Then religious freedom in America faces a grave threat. Now, the reason I know about this is I'm on the email list of an organization called the Alliance Defending Freedom. Alliance Defending Freedom took up the case. Alliance Defending Freedom is a nonprofit legal service. They don't charge those that they represent. It is all done through donations. Alliance Defending Freedom has taken up his case alongside co-counsel Ulrich, Harrington, and Sutcliffe, and the federal courts have been nothing but a problem, so it's going to the Supreme Court. And their argument strikes at the heart of what it means to have religious freedom in this country. The ability to live according to one's faith without government interference. The implications of this case extend far beyond one man's prayer gathering. When government can require permits for private religious expression in one's own home, it sets a dangerous precedent that could affect Americans of all faiths. The fundamental right to exercise one's religion freely, as enumerated by the First Amendment, means little if that expression can be regulated out of existence through unreasonable permitting requirements. As this case makes its way through our judicial system, as the Supreme Court decides, okay, we'll hear it, it serves as a critical test of our constitutional principles. The outcome will determine whether Americans can continue to gather in homes for religious purposes without government surveillance, permitting requirements, or the threat of losing their residence. Daniel Grant shouldn't have to choose between his faith and his family home. And in America, no one should. Now, that said, I know what Alan's first question is going to be. So before I go to Dennis first, I am going to cut Alan off at the pass. Should the Supreme Court even be taking this case? It's a local case. It's a good point. That's a very good point. Were you not thinking that?
Actually, I was thinking something slightly different.
Okay, where in the Constitution? I went into the state Constitution, though.
Yeah, I know.
State Constitution, they're still violating. But here's the problem. If the state is, and I don't know the answer to this, because to me, technically, the Supreme Court should be taking this case, but where's this guy supposed to? I mean, this is wrong. And so it does create a real conundrum for me. I want it to go to the Supreme Court. Technically, you're right. Federal court system is not supposed to be even taking this case. It's a state case. But the state courts and all the minor federal courts say, nah, you're screwed. This is religious freedom here. All right, but hang on to your thoughts. It's Dennis's turn to go first.
Go.
So, Dennis, what's your thoughts about what we had to say?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you're just wearing me out here.
Handing you some doozies today, huh?
Well, no, I mean, to me, it's the same thing. I mean, this is all malarkey. These are all people with their heads up their rear ends, that are in in politics. They're making bad laws,
Right.
you know, and you're not going to fix it. I mean, I'm ready to say the answer is vigilante justice. The people need to take it back. You know, we're talking about the court systems. The court systems screw it up. Institution, higher education, they screw it up. The doctors, they screw it up. All the people that have been trained and paid and are the professionals in their deal are taking us over the cliff. So it's just time to say to hell with them. You know, I'm just saying, no, I'm not playing this game anymore. You know, and I don't know. What are you going to do? You're going to have the prayer meeting in your home? I have prayer meetings in my home, used to. You know, there's probably a lot of things that a lot of people do that these idiots would say, oh, that's something that's done in the house of worship. Therefore, you have to have a permit. I said, no. The way you practice your religion at best is in your own personal life, with your own personal family. You know, your home ought to be a sanctuary. It ought to be an extension of the church, or the church ought to be an extension of your house. However you want to look at it. You know, to become godlike is a good thing. You're going to say that for me to want to become godlike, I have to get a permit? Screw you. I'm going to do it anyway. And then what? Are they going to come take my house? And then what? They're going to put 20 squad cars, you know, like at Derek's place, you know, at 6 a.m, you know, right, for a law that he violated. And then what? You're going to go and say, not on my watch, and you all kill each other in a fiery blaze because of this stupidity? I don't know. I mean, you talk about needing a reset, and, you know, I'm not one to throw up my hands and say, forget about it, but this is just, there's too many stupid things going on, you know, and it ain't going to get fixed with emails. You know, it's in the hearts and minds of people that have been polluted, that don't understand basic principles. This is why this country shouldn't have unlimited immigration. You shouldn't allow, you know, people to get into school and get into colleges and play on ball teams to make them feel good. You want to feel good, play in the Little League when you're a kid, get your participation trophy because you were on a team and somebody had to take you. But when you get into school and it's competitive, you don't get that rule anymore. Sorry, you know, it's not the way life is. And people are trying to rewrite the basic DNA of human living, and screw them. You know, I just I don't have any patience for this. I don't know.
So said the vulture on the cactus. Never mind patience. No,
yeah.
No, but here's the thing. But here's the thing. Here's part of the problem. We keep looking at it as a political problem. This is a cultural problem. Our culture has let this garbage happen.
Well, I was saying it's human DNA. You know, it just. You were asking the question earlier, you know, about, you know, what people would say. And I made this comment, but I had my mic on mute and you didn't hear it, is that you get a bunch of 10-year-olds, you know, average 10-year-olds. I don't care what the race is, what, you know, average 10-year-olds, you put them in a room, you explain something to them, and then probably 9 out of 10 are going to get it right that, no, you shouldn't kill the baby at near term. You know, they don't have PhDs, you know, but they probably would get that right. And if your average senior in a high school with a sentence that's already somewhat structured can't figure out where to put the noun and the verb or whatever it is, you know, then they have to take a certain amount of responsibility for their lack of education. I would say stupidity, but I don't know if they're stupid, you know. Maybe they're just lazy. And with lazy, you get stupid.
Well,
you know,
and in the end, we do have our ability to make our decisions. We have the ability to say yes or no. And our culture, people have become these lemmings that, you know, are just more, or maybe I should say the mice behind the Pied Piper just jumping off the cliff because, you know, we're told that's the way to do it. And we've lost our discernment. We've lost our ability to analyze logically, to have civil discourse, to have common sense, and it's a cultural issue. I really do believe it is. but it's a cultural issue that has been under attack by a political enemy.
Let me ask you one question here.
All right.
The idiot neighbor, what was the rationale? Did he have standing? Was he protesting prayer, or was he thinking, oh, this is now a place of worship? He's breaking the zoning. Was he thinking that far ahead? No, he probably just went down there and said, I don't want these guys praying next to me. Just like you're saying you don't want the guy next to you playing drum at 10, 11 o'clock at night. I don't know how the guy could file a complaint that even got traction. I mean, that's a problem.
I read two articles about this and did a little bit of research, and I found nothing on the person. I don't know their name, if they're male or female, and maybe that's out there somewhere, but from my research, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't find out.
Well, that's because they're trying, the people that are writing the article are protecting that person because they like what he's doing or she's doing.
Right. All right. Very good. All right, Alan, your turn for another rosy topic.
Oh, it's just fun and games. But before I go on to this new funny, I want to bring up something on the previous one you did. Okay. There is a federal law, Unborn Victims of Violence Act, known as the Lacey and Connors Law. Harming or killing an unborn child during the commission of a federal violent crime is recognized as a separate, distinct offense. You also have this in states too. If a pregnant woman is murdered, the assailant can face 2 counts of murder or a specialized fetal homicide charge, depending on the specific state statute and the gestational age of the fetus. Well, if that's what can happen to somebody who commits a violent crime, passing a law doesn't change it. I just wanted to throw that out there. All right, now to this one. So people are walking to this home. And I'd love to read the complaint.
Well, and the complaint, and the way I'm understanding the way the complaint happened, it's not that they saw people walking to the home.
Right.
They learned of the plan. That's what the article says. The neighbor learned of these plans and then reportedly complained to city officials.
Right.
So, in other words, it wasn't, oh, what's going on here? Oh, what fresh hell is this? No, it was, he's going to have a prayer meeting, huh?
I mean, there's so many questions to be answered, to be asked and answered. What day? What time? Were they banging on the drums? Were they chanting? Or could you not even hear them if you're stood out on the sidewalk? But if I open my home to have a Super Bowl party, is that okay? And there's going to be a lot of yelling and screaming and drinking.
Yeah, but you don't have to get a permit for that.
I don't. Okay, that's nice.
Yeah, and trust me, I've thrown my fair share of football parties. One of them a Super Bowl party.
Right. Now, let's say it's time of year, and I'm going to invite people over, and we're going to light Hanukkah candles. Do I need to get a permit for that?
I'm guessing in whatever this town is, University Heights, Ohio. At this rate, maybe.
And if you decide to invite a bunch of people over because you're going to decorate and turn the lights on a Christmas tree, well, are you going to need a permit?
Well, what if I'm going to have a pagan rites ceremony with a sacrifice?
That's fine. That's fine. To me, this kind of thing is, and we're seeing a lot of this,
right? Because
it's grown over time. This is a very specific call to action that And it's not just those people who are in attendance. It's people in the community. It's other neighbors, other friends. You want this going down in your area? This absolute lack of intolerance? And it's still, because it's very hard to understand why this neighbor did this, is what is this person's complaint other than they're having a prayer meeting, so this makes this a house of worship? No, it's not a house of worship. This is a private home. And
this is good versus evil. This is good versus evil. It's simply as that, and the person's motivation is wrong.
I'm just curious as what it is, because the fact that these people are getting together and, are they praying for a minute? Are they praying for 4 hours?
And like I said, I don't know if it's, some big, giant, loud get together, or if it's just
I would really
exchange of prayers. But nonetheless, this is a war against truth. Yeah, that's all it is. Truth has become the enemy,
and
what's right has become the enemy.
And what happens?
Well, Doug, just real quick here, if you do something that the church does, and now they say you're a house of worship. Well, if you do something that the restaurant does by having a Super Bowl party, that's things restaurants do. That's what, clubs do. That's what bars do. Yeah. So if you do something that traditionally is something that's done as a bar, are they going to say now, we're going to make your house a saloon and you can't live there anymore?
With their line of reasoning, that is the conclusion, the logical conclusion. I am right there with you.
Yeah, that's why these guys, they need to be taken out and shot. It's ridiculous. You can't do anything in your home if some business does it. Yeah.
Oh, well, wait a minute. So that means you can't sleep in your home because that's what you do at motels. So does that mean you have to charge yourself?
No, you can sleep in your home, but if you have visitors.
Oh.
You probably can't even have
sex. That's a logical conclusion.
Well, maybe you can't have sex with your wife in your home because you do that in hotels. Maybe. I mean, it's just asinine.
And the thing is, we're being kind of ridiculous, but the ridiculous is happening.
Well, what happens if at this prayer meeting they watch old football games, and when the game goes to commercial, they pray? And then when the game comes back on, they stop. Is that okay?
What we're seeing is that truth is now the enemy. What we're seeing now, and understand, be it the Bible or the Constitution, which serve as the standards for truth, this is now under attack. And and this is what, when you turn on the light, the cockroaches don't like it. And so rather than scatter, they are fighting back. And truth, deception, and false teaching is the enemy of truth. That is the darkness, and that is what we're seeing pop up here. I believe this is spiritual warfare, and you guys know me well enough. I've always believed that we're fighting spirits that are not of God, false prophets of the world, whatever. 1 John 4.
What about the COVID rule where they were? I think this was in California. They wouldn't allow families to have Thanksgiving dinner together.
Right.
Too many people.
Too many people.
But you could go to a public restaurant and sit across from people, have dinner without wearing a mask.
As long as you wore your mask while you weren't taking a bite.
Well, while you're sitting at the table, if you went to the bathroom, you had to put it on. But while you're sitting at the table, you didn't have to.
Right. Oh, it was all idiotic. Absolutely. But see, and you and I know truth. So we know it's ridiculous because we understand truth. This is truth versus deception. Ultimately, that's what it is. And some of these people They've been influenced by their upbringing, education. They're indoctrinating these kids with this garbage. The cultural influences. But and parents and friends and worldly influences and all of that. And then we have all these people going, well, the world told me so. You say, well, and then when something goes wrong, they say, well, I didn't understand. Yes, you did. Truth is not hard to understand when you pull your head out of a bag or bucket full of lies. But they won't do it. You and I see clearly in today's political landscape, we understand what the truth is. People, for some reason, can't. And you've got these socialists and communists and woke and anti-Christian, anti-prayer ideologies rising in American politics, leading people astray, leading people away from biblical principles and constitutional values. Now, that said, in the end, we still make our own decisions. So they're not getting a whole lot of sympathy from me. Well, I didn't know that you would die if you jumped off a cliff. Doesn't matter. You jumped. You pay the consequence. Right, wrong, or in between, we're the ones that say yes, no, or maybe, and we are going to pay the consequences for actions. We need to take responsibility for actions, understand cause and effect. Cause and effect has gone out the window a long time ago. And then we've got a whole society then that when things go wrong, when they blame others for their conclusions, when you and I, people who understand the truth, go, should have talked to us. We know the truth. I mean, and so how do you get people to understand how stupid that is? That a neighbor goes, oh, they're going to have a prayer meeting. That's not right. Oh, well, they were going to be offended, so it must be okay. That is stupidity. How do you convince a bunch of people who are completely enveloped in stupidity that outside their bubble there's truth? That they're surrounded by lies. Somewhere out there there's truth. They're just not willing. They would rather blame others. They would rather wallow around in stupidity and deception. And I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, we see the truth for a reason, be it because of our faith or because we're, I don't know, paying attention, whatever. I mean, I ground myself in scripture and regular study and, the Bible and Constitution and constantly. And, and I have a deep familiarity with the Constitution's texts, original meaning, historical context. I look at history and go, well, that was stupid. We ought not do that. But I mean, but we have people who don't even, they're not even willing to hear that much. Well, no, I was told that that's all a bunch of garbage, so I don't even want to hear what you got to say. La, 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 la. I mean, what comes to mind, and Dennis, you probably will know what I'm talking about here, is the Bereans. Paul went to talk to the Bereans about the message of Christ. The Thessalonians, they just took it in and that was that. The Bereans were very different. They said, well, okay, I'm excited. This sounds good. Let me double check everything against scripture first. I'm not going to be a gullible believer. I'm not going to accept everything without question. I'll listen eagerly, but I'm going to examine carefully. Let me double check what you said against these resources and other resources and my analytical logic discernment. Then we'll talk a little further. Right? I mean, how hard, and it really isn't hard to verify. It isn't hard to have a daily discipline to check that something is stupid. And this goes beyond verification of the truth. Oh, I don't like them praying and I hate prayer. And so I'm just going to complain. And the city official goes, oh yeah, I hate that too. You got all these white liberal Karens getting together. Yeah, I'm just so offended. Oh, we better stop it. I mean, and so get back to Alan earlier. It boggles the mind. It boggles the mind that anybody is thinking in this manner. Who cares if they're praying and you disagree with it? We don't have a clause in the Constitution, and there is no natural right for you to not be offended. Buck up. Sometimes people do things that are messed up. Don't go to the legal system to force your belief onto them. They're not forcing their belief on you. They're having it inside the home. They're praying inside the home. They're having a little prayer meeting, but you're so offended. You can't stand it. Why can't stand the fact that you believe the way you do? Should I have you arrested and thrown into the ocean and fed to the sharks over it? No. You're entitled to be an idiot. And I'm entitled to have the opinion that you are an idiot. Oh, Dennis, I'm starting to sound like you for a moment.
Well, I'm just thinking, if you can't pray, what if you want to watch CNN all the time? And that would offend me, knowing that my next door neighbor is watching CNN all the time. Can I go down to the city
see it through their window?
Yeah, I mean, come on.
All right, gentlemen, we've gone to the 2-hour mark, so it's time to say adieu. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me on this program. There's a lot of things I'm trying to figure out, and I need to buy more equipment for things. This is what I'm learning. There's a lot of things I need to do, want to do, and I can't do. So if you are out there and you're like, well, Doug, I want to help. It's real easy. DouglasVGibbs.com. Hit the donation button there at the bottom of the first page, or become a $9 a month member. Now, that $9 a month member, that's also going to access Constitution classes I'm getting ready to begin on the site. We're also going to start going through the Constitution on my Friday show, their Patriot Soapbox. We can still do other stuff too, but its primary focus is going to be Constitution. Either way, you've got access to Constitution classes. And we still need more equipment. We need to get this thing working the way we want it to work, but we need you. Donation, $9 a month. Just go to DouglasVGibbs.com. You can figure it out. Alan, plug yourself, sir.
FedEd, FEDED.us for basic monetary system education, and Patriot Soapbox. Check that out on Sundays, 5 to 7 p.m. West Coast time for the show for the Republic. Thank you, Doug.
And thank you, Alan, for joining me on the show, as well as you, Dennis. Thank you for joining me. I know you really don't have anything to plug per se.
No, I'm going to take you up on what you did last week. Equipping the persecuted. That's a website to help the Christians that are being wiped out in Nigeria. Equipping the persecuted.
Very cool. Thank you. And thanks for joining the program. And for all of you out there, united we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. We need to work together. We need to be a country, a patriotic country who understands the truth and writes that truth right into government if we have to. Thanks for spending the time with us. We'll see you next time. God bless. We're out of here. Bye-bye now.